John Sculley, author of Moonshot, former CEO of both Pepsi and Apple, entrepreneur and mentor. So nice to talk to you.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Technology is one point that you make in the book, the importance of that, but it's also people. And I want to focus on that because you talk a lot about adaptive innovators, and that can be company or people. But when you look at the business world today, who are a couple of, in your view, adaptive innovators at public companies today? Who is figuring this out and bringing a different experience to the customer?
Well, you have to go to a very short list of incredibly talented entrepreneurs who aren't just adaptive innovators in their own company, and I believe that's a much, much larger group of people, but people who are literally changing entire industries. And that's what Moonshot is really about. It's a term that's used in Silicon Valley to say that the day after a moonshot, the world is different than it was the day before. And that's things like the introduction of the Apple II computer, which became the first useful personal computer, the introduction of the World Wide Web, the launch of Google and relevancy ranking and the ability to access all kinds of information for free, or the launch of Apple's iPhone. These were world-changing events, and so names like Elon Musk, Larry Page, Mark Zuckerberg are the obvious names that everybody recognizes. But what's really going on are the adaptive innovators, the names you don't know, the people inside of organizations who are the change agents, the people who may not be as brilliant as those short list of names I mentioned, but they're people who have a passion to make a difference. And they may be inside larger organizations trying to make a difference as champions, or more likely, they're out in startup companies.
So let me stop and ask you about Mark Zuckerberg. Was he an innovator? Because before Facebook, there were these other short-lived, well, they're still around, some of them, MySpace, Friendster, these things that didn't take off. So was he just a better marketer, or was he truly an innovator?
Well, it's what I call 360-degree managers. People who have to be good at more than one or two things. And in the case of Mark Zuckerberg, not only was he there at the right time, you could say that was lucky. He was at the right place. He was at Harvard University, and there was a lot of talent around to work with him back in those early days when he was literally just trying to find a way to meet girls and build a social ecosystem. But he had the ability, even at a very young age, to see that you had to have a big vision. You had to have a noble cause that has basically been one of the first principles that has been followed very carefully by Facebook ever since it started. And that first principle was, we're going to connect the world together through messaging. Simple idea, an amazing platform of change for the internet exactly at the time that the internet was exploding in growth. But they almost missed it with mobile. And one of the most remarkable adaptive innovator stories I've ever seen in a public company was what's happened in the last 3 years at Facebook. Because people were saying, hey, they're getting an aging population, the young millennials are now going to new services like Snapchat and Tumblr and Twitter and so forth. And yet, what did they do? They went out and they bought WhatsApp, a 4-year-old company with 56 employees, with 560 million users and no revenue. And people thought they were nuts because they paid $19 billion for this company. Well, it was all part of a brilliant strategy to pivot towards mobile. And they've used WhatsApp as a way to really build a pipeline of people to help stimulate what has now become Facebook Mobile. And now, 3 years later, that plus some other very smart moves that Facebook made, they get 50% of their revenue as a public company coming from mobile, and they didn't have that 3 years ago.
Why does somebody like Mark Zuckerberg need Sheryl Sandberg? What is it about that dynamic in technology in particular that you need a lot of very smart people all working together?
Well, I think the teamwork of Sheryl Sandberg and Mark Zuckerberg is just simply amazing, in that they complement each other beautifully. And she's never had the ambition to be the CEO. He is the CEO, but she is so highly regarded, and she brings experience and discipline, and having been one of the first Google executives, she brings a lot of relevant experience.
John Sculley, author of Moonshot, it's been great chatting with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rhonda.